In this video, I'll show you an automation that allows you to generate and schedule your social media posts across all platforms from one Airtable base. You can either enter in a URL for which the automation will then scrape that URL and create content directly for that, or you can enter a topic where we're using Perplexity to research that and then generate the social media content based on that. You can then view the content that's generated, decide which platforms to publish it to, and then set the date that you want that to be published. I'll be giving you a full rundown of this automation, but if you want to grab the blueprints, then check out the link in the description to our community. We already have a bunch of videos where we're going through exactly how to connect to social platforms and auto post to them via Airtable, such as this simple Instagram workflow or a similar Facebook one. And on our main channel, we have some far more sophisticated tutorials on AI social media automation. But we've got a lot of requests in our community to create a pretty contained automation that can generate content and push that to lots of different social platforms from one Airtable base. So that's exactly what this is. So how does this automation work? I'll start by giving a demo. I'm just going to copy and paste this in, and now we have a new topic. There are then two ways to generate the content. You can either press this button, which triggers this make.com automation. If you're on the paid version of Airtable, you can even get it to instantly trigger the automation when you change this to generate content. We have a video about instant triggers in the description if you want to follow that. But for the moment, let's just click this button. I'll click generate, and while this is processing, you will see that this scenario has now been picked up. Now going to Perplexity to go research that topic. It's researched the topic, so if we go to choices, message, content, it's come back with a response. It's searched a bunch of different sources, so lots of good stuff there. Next, we're going to O3 to generate the text, and we're doing it all in one go for all of the social networks. I'll show you exactly how that works in a bit. Okay, let's see the response from that. So we see that we now have a collection of results. We have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We can map each of these to our Airtable fields. After that, we're generating an image. We're going to fal.ai to generate a Flux1 image for that. We've updated the Airtable record, so let's go back to it. We can click this expand button. Okay, so there we go. We have this pretty cool generated image, as well as text for each of the social networks. From there, we can now choose which network to push those to. So in this case, I delete all of them apart from Facebook, and I mark as ready for posting. I'll set the date as today. And then we have another automation set up here, which is set to run at a schedule. Now, if I press run once, it's going to pick up that record. It'll go and ignore the other routes because I've only selected Facebook. It's going through the Facebook route here. It has a photo, and now it's uploaded the file and the photo. And you can see that's been pushed to Facebook. And this data is automatically updated to published, so it will not be picked up again. That's a very basic example of a social media post that can be generated and created via the system. Currently, this specific automation supports text and text plus photo posts, but you could extend this however way you want for video posts as well. And we've already covered how to upload those in other videos on our channel. So let's walk through the setup for each of those modules. To explain the Airtable base setup at a high level, this first column is an auto number type field. This will automatically update. The next one is this button, which we'll explain in a minute. For date, this is a date field, and you can add in whatever format you want for that. The social platforms here is a multiple select. So multiple select, and you add in whatever fields you want. The image field is an attachment type. Then each of these individual platform texts, Facebook text, Twitter text, and so on, are all long text fields. So long text, as you see there. And then we have this warnings and errors field, which is a long text. First off, we'll go with the content generation piece. So we have a button here. If you go to edit field, you'll see that that button is actually triggering a URL. It's triggering this webhook, and then we're also sending in the record ID of this particular Airtable row. If you've never done this before, then again, check out the link in the description to our video on Airtable instant triggering. Then at the very start of this scenario, we've added in this webhook module. Within this module, we create the webhook, and then we copy out this address to the clipboard and then paste it into here. And then we have this other record ID part of the URL. That's everything from there to there. And then we just simply have to add in this record ID at the end. When we press this button, it will get picked up in make.com, and we will then see this record ID be reflected here. After that, we add in this get a record module within Airtable. Then we pass in the record ID from the webhook. When we're clicking this button, we're only sending our scenario the actual Airtable record ID. So we need to actually get the full record. So we select get a record, and then we're passing in this record ID from this webhook. Make sure to select the correct base and the correct table. Next up, we're using the set multiple variables node, which is exactly as it sounds. We're setting and creating multiple variables within one module. This is a nice to have within the scenario. It's not really required. It just makes it a bit easier for anybody importing our blueprints to update things in one place rather than have to update multiple modules. But we simply have two variables here. One is the topic or URL. So here we're just going to map this topic, which is this topic here, to this variable. So that means when we're referencing that variable in other modules, we can just reference it like so. And then we have this fal API key. This is the API key. It's the password for the image generation service that we're using for this. Next up, we have this router. This is just a bit of validation. It's not really required for the scenario, but we want to make sure that something has been provided here before proceeding with the automation. So in this case, we have a filter set up and we're checking if this topic exists. So if that field actually exists, and if the field does not equal empty string, we're making sure that field is not an empty string, so we're making sure there's actually something in it. If the field is empty, then it ends the automation, so it does not proceed with the rest of the content generation. So we have this webhook response added in here. Again, this is a nice to have, but if you're clicking the button, what happens is a new page or a new tab opens, and by sending this back to the browser, then it will automatically close that page. Again, not explicitly required, but it's pretty nice to have. If a topic has been provided, then we have this fallback route set here. So we have this route, fallback is marked as yes. That means it's going to go through this part of the flow if that route was not hit. After that, we split out the flow depending on if this was a URL or if it was just a line of text. So how are we filtering for that? We have another router here and click into the filter. This is a simple enough pattern match where we're passing in this topic, and then we're using this text operator to match this specific pattern. I asked ChatGPT to generate this, so this will return anything where we have this HTTP or HTTPS URL at the very start. And if it's not a URL, again, we're using this fallback setting on the route. It's only ever going to hit one of these. If it is a URL, we're going through this part of the flow. We're using this HTTP request to then scrape that data. Instead of getting the entire data for the page, which is what you would do if you entered in the URL by itself, we're using this trick to use this Jina.ai service. So just add it to the very start of the URL, and then it will return back with a much cleaner page markdown. This is a simple example of that, where we get the page markdown, which is in a really clean format we can then send in to OpenAI. Otherwise, if we got back the full page source, this could be a massive, massive page, which would be a lot of noise and would cost a lot of extra in tokens. This is an error handler that you can ignore. It's just if there's issues with that request. In this case, we're using this advanced O3 model, but you can kind of use whatever model you want. I'm using a newer chain of thought model because I really want to make sure that we get a Twitter post that's less than 280 characters. More primitive models can be pretty bad at actually getting that correct. So for this, we have this system role set here, and the prompt is a pretty simple one. You can adapt this however you want. You are an independent journalist reporting on news in your industry based on a provided article. You will provide concise, relatively casual social media posts, objectively covering the news without being promotional. Only respond with the text for the post with no other introductory information. Be concise with your points and provide the most up-to-date points in 2 sentences. The text for Twitter must be a maximum of 280 characters. Do not include URLs in your response. I'll add in this E. Use emojis where relevant, but do so sparingly. We'll respond in JSON in the following format. This is absolutely key. If you want to get back multiple data items in one response, then using JSON mode is the way to go. So we have this simple example where we have curly brackets. We have each of the individual field names here. And then at the very bottom, you go to response format. We need to select JSON object and then parse JSON response. And then we select a user message, and then we pass in the data from the previous request. As an example of what that looks like, when we actually parse that result, we get this response. So we get each individual data item that we can then map to Airtable. If you did not use JSON mode in this case, we need to make 4 separate calls to OpenAI and then map each of those outputs to Airtable. Because remember, we want to map each of these to a separate field. Next up, we're using fal.ai to generate the images. Now, you can use any image generation service you want for this, but in this case, we're using a HTTP request, and then we're providing this URL. Within fal.ai, you go to the playground, go to any image model, then within API, go to curl, and then scroll down, and then just copy and paste out the URL you want from that. So I can copy and paste that out here. A little trick that works here is that if you remove this queue part from the start, it just makes it a lot easier to integrate with because you do not need to poll and get the response separately. So once you have that URL, you need to add in this authorization, and then you have this key and then space, and then add in your fal API key. To get your key, go to this API key section, go to add key, and then simply copy it in there, making sure you have this space afterwards. In this case, if you're using this set multiple variables, then just add in your key there. Finally, we need to add body type raw, content type is JSON, and then the request content. So copy and paste out the data format that we need from that curl command in fal.ai, and you get something like this. Whereas all you need to do is just update the actual prompt within here. I'm adding in a photorealistic image of, and then we have this result. This result is this image prompt helper API call to OpenAI. We're using this to try to simplify the prompt, create a much simpler prompt that we send to fal.ai to create the image that just makes it a bit cleaner. The idea of an image prompt helper we've used a bunch of times on our channel, where we take in a big block of text and then we synthesize that into a few words that's just a bit cleaner to send to the image model. That's exactly what we're doing here. For example, we send in a big block of text like so, and then the response of that is something simple like search engine optimization. Once all of this data has been created, then we're going to send all of that to Airtable. We'll use this update a record module within Airtable. We'll select the correct base, the post, then we'll map the ID from the very start of the scenario. And we simply just update the fields that we want to update. So if I can uncheck this map, I'll see the list of statuses. I want to keep that as not ready. Then for image, I'm selecting the file URL. This image here is an attachment type within the Airtable base. For this, the file URL, I'm selecting images URL, which is the response from fal.ai. I can keep this file name empty because if you do so, Airtable will generate the name. And then I'm mapping each of these items from the social media text prompt that we sent to OpenAI. So we're mapping the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn items. And that's all from the parsed JSON result from that previous module. Finally, we add in this webhook response. When you press this button, it opens up a new window, and this just closes that window. So again, it's a nice to have, but it's pretty handy. So that's that part of the flow done. If you send in a URL, that's what's going to happen. If this is not a URL, it's going to go down through this part of the flow. And this is using Perplexity to research the topic. So if you don't have a Perplexity account, then go to perplexity.ai, go to the API section. You can add in some credits and then copy out your API key and then add in your connection there. For a model, you can choose any of these. Sonar Pro is a good one to use for something simple like this. And then for the prompt here, we have research the following topic and provide interest in up-to-date information, insights, facts, figures for that topic. The topic is, and then we're just simply passing in this topic again. That's down as a user role, nothing else is provided, so press save. Then for social media text generation, the system prompt is almost the exact same as the previous one. And then for the user role, we're passing in the message content, so choices, message content, and that will give you the text response from Perplexity. After that, everything is exactly the same as the flow up here. A final point to mention on this part of the flow here, you see this error handler over this flow here. That's simply if there's an issue scraping the page, we go and update the Airtable record. So this is an update module for Airtable. We're passing in the ID from the start that we picked up. The status would then be marked as error like you see here. And then we're finally passing in the standard webhook response that we've used elsewhere in the scenario. So this is just a kind of a neat enough way so that you will know if there are issues, and this will stop the automation from actually breaking. If you do not have an error handler like this, and if you're getting continuous errors when trying to scrape pages, then the automation might stop. You probably get some warning messages to your email inbox. That's the entire flow to generate content using the button press that you see here. If you want to generate that content by moving it to generate content like you see here, instead of pressing the button, again, check the link in the description. But even if you're on the free version of Airtable, you could bulk add lots of different rows, mark it as generate content, and nothing would happen until you add in a separate scenario like this. So you could run a separate scenario, get this to run either on a scheduled basis or trigger it manually. And this is going to search all records where the status is equal to generate content. Actually, that's not required. It can be simpler like this, where status is generate content. And then after that, if there are results, so if the total number of bundles is greater than 0, it's then going to call the webhook. So it will call this webhook that we see at the start of the scenario. And then we're passing in this record ID in the exact same way that we're passing the record ID from Airtable. So potentially you could have 50 rows here, press the run once button here. As long as your limit here is high enough, it'll pick up every single one of those rows and then trigger this webhook for every single row, which will then trigger this scenario. It's just potentially a neat enough way you could do it, even if you're on the free version of Airtable. Next, I'll explain the scheduling and posting aspect to the social networks. We have this separate automation here, which you could run on a scheduled basis. So you could run it at regular intervals, a few times a day, or once a day, for example. At the very start, we have this Airtable search records module. We're selecting our social media base, the correct table. We're sorting by field. So we're sorting by this date field in ascending order, and we're leaving everything else blank apart from the formula section. So in this formula section, it's where the status is marked as ready for posting. So the status is marked as ready for posting like this, and where the date is before today plus 1. So that's effectively if the date is before tomorrow. You can pause this video if you want to copy out that formula. And very importantly, you only want to set this to 1. You likely only want to pick up one record at a time when you're posting to the social platforms, because you really do not want to bombard them. So set this as 1, and then it will pick up one record every time this scenario runs on a scheduled basis. So press save. From here we have a filter set up. So again, total number of bundles. It's just a way of making sure that if there are no results here, then it does not keep going through the flow with no data. From here, I have this set multiple variables module set up here. Here I'm mapping each of the Airtable fields to just variable names within make.com. Again, not really required, but it makes it a lot easier if you're importing our blueprints to be able to very quickly update all of these in one place. Next up, we have a router which will then post these to each of the social networks. And very importantly, we have filters set up so it will only post them when we actually have them selected within this social platform box here. Within this, with an Airtable, we have these set up as a multiple select field. So we have the multi-select, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, each as separate items. When we look at those within Make, they come through as an array. So you see it down there from the Airtable record. This is an array of items. That's a list of items. And in the drop down here, you see there are lots of different conditions. So we want to use this array operators contains condition to make sure that this item is within the social platforms array. And we're checking for Facebook here. In this case, we've only selected Facebook. So we'll see that it was blocked at each of these routes apart from this, the last time it was run. So I click on this, we see this check mark here that it went through the route. I'll see this, and it was blocked. So this is behaving correctly. So let's follow the Facebook route first. It's gone down here. Social platforms contains Facebook as an array operator. And then we have another router here. It's either going to be a photo post or a text post. If it's a photo post, so if this image URL, that's image URL here, if it exists, which is a basic operator, and if it's not equal to empty string, then we're going to use this get a file module. So HTTP, get a file. We're going to pass in that image URL. Then when we get a file, we're going to add in this upload a photo module within Facebook, and then that auto maps. So again, have a look at our video on how to auto post to Facebook, because I go through this a lot slower and step by step. But we're effectively mapping the binary data from this HTTP module to this Facebook module, and then we're passing in the Facebook text from Airtable directly. Within this filter, this is a fallback route. So if this was not hit, then by default, it's going to then upload a text post. So I have this create a post. I'm mapping in the message, which is Facebook text, and a link URL. So you can choose to add in a link URL here. The links are currently blank within this Airtable base, but you could also link to the original article URL or link to your website, for example. That's the Facebook setup as it is there. For the Twitter integration, Make.com are completely discontinuing their support for Twitter. So check out the link in the description where on our channel, Daniel goes through a bunch of different alternatives to the original Twitter module. But the easiest approach is using Buffer, which is an external service. You go and create an account with Buffer, add in your connection, and then map your Twitter text. And again, we have this filter for if a photo was present. We select attach media to update, and then we just map in that image URL. If it's a text post, we do the exact same thing, except we simply select attach media as no. To see the full tutorial of how to use Buffer and how to connect to Twitter via make.com, then check out the link where Daniel goes through that in more detail. For LinkedIn, we have the exact same filter settings for the photo and fallback text post here. We have a HTTP module to get the file, get the binary data for the image. Then we have this create a user image post within LinkedIn. Again, check out the link in the description where we have another video that goes through how to connect to LinkedIn. But here we're automatically mapping the file. We're passing in the content for that particular post. The feed distribution will be your main feed. So press save and then you're good to go. Otherwise, if it's a text post, then you're going to add in this create a user text post module. The content for that will be the LinkedIn text from Airtable, and then you're good to go from there. And for Instagram, instead of actually getting the binary data for the image, pass in the image URL itself, and then Instagram will then grab that image directly from Airtable. Then we're passing in this Instagram text from Airtable directly into the caption for Instagram. If there's no photo available for this record, we have this fallback route set up here, where instead of posting to Instagram, we update that Airtable row, we select our base, table, record ID, and then within this warnings field on the right-hand side, we just are noting, did not post to Instagram, no photo present. So at least we have a record of why things did not post to Instagram. So that's the overall automation. I'd highly recommend that if you're using this, that you extend and enhance it directly for your specific use case or for the use case of your client, because that's where a system like this thrives, is because it's so customizable. If you're running an e-commerce store, for example, instead of using these AI images, you might want to use images from your store directly. In that case, you would update this automation and replace these modules. You may want to write in a completely different tone of voice. In that case, make sure to go into these modules here and just update the prompting as necessary. You could even streamline this, so instead of having separate fields for each, you could have 2 fields, one for Twitter and one for all of the other networks. So make sure to check out the link in the description to our community where you'll get this template and many others, and you can learn how to customize them for your business. You can join hundreds of fellow automators through our active discussion boards and our live workshops, where we have one almost every day of the week. And you also get instant access to all of these courses right away. Thanks for watching.